Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back again to redo my Dispriest Mage Tower guide, because they made it significantly harder and quite a bit different than my experiences 4 years ago and from the PTR. So I wanted to put this together, remake the video, and I'll also have some updates in our written guides as well, including my raw notes and everything in my Discord, linked in the description below. So let's start it up. You've got two enemies you have to deal with. You've got Tugar Blood Totem, and he's going to be popping up a Feltotem that'll stun you. You need to kill it off. He's going to have a Fel Burst, which increases in damage basically over time, or the lower HP that he goes. And you're going to have his buddy Jormog with the Sonic Screech, which again increases in damage over time, especially the lower HP they go. And it'll also lock you out of your spells if you're casting at that time. This is an incredibly long fight. I didn't use any cringe BC, triple, quadruple socket gear or anything like that. I just used normie Sanctum of Domination gear you find anywhere. Setup I ran with was Masochism, Solace, and I'll talk about that in a sec, Psychic Voice, Divine Star, Lenience, all that other good stuff, alright? There is a very good legitimate strategy of using Bender and Fade to eat up those Fel Bursts, but I kind of felt like I had enough on my plate already, and I didn't want to add more to it, because this challenge is really all about multitasking and flexing between a lot of different jobs, okay? Keep in mind, Jormog starts off with 9 stacks of damage reduction. I am using my Fear on cooldown. You also have a Fel dot that you need to dispel every single time. So as I was running through it, I made sure that I was always going to be dispelling that Fel dot as quickly as I could. Really important notes for this is Mind Blast is extremely good, but you don't want to use it on cooldown, okay? And we'll talk about that just a little bit later. Once you get into this intermission phase here, you want to make sure that you're standing in the middle of the room and you're positioning yourself so that Jormog is going to run through 1 or 2 of those different stalactite rocks. It's very difficult to do this while you're having to deal with a ton of spitters, and the spitters increase over the course of the fight. So getting this done as fast as you possibly can is really important. Stay in the middle of the room, watch for him to poke out his head, and then quickly move into a position, because you have a couple seconds or a second or two to make sure that you deal or make sure you move into the correct position, and then once you move into that correct position, he'll follow you and he'll try to run you over, okay? Keep in mind, you'll have these combinations of, like, Feltotem goes out, you get dotted up, and the Fel Burst is coming out. Those combinations can really, really hurt. And once you start the first 2 or 3 Fel Bursts, then you're going to fall into this order where you're always going to be Fear Bombing in the intermission, and then you're going to be using mitigation when you come out of that intermission. One thing I didn't do that you're not going to see in this video, which I would highly recommend you do, is dragging Tugar to the middle of the room and casting Mindseer. It's a lot more mana efficient than what I was doing, and as you'll see at the end of this dungeon, or end of this boss fight, I started really getting low on mana, even with running something like Solace. So I go with a very slow and steady and methodical strat, but of course, more mana you have on hand to help you extend further through this is really, really valuable. You can also see that, while it's not recommended, you definitely can survive missing one of these different circles. Once you get down to 3 or 4 stacks of the debuff, as you see on the right side of your screen on Jormog, I then am 100% focusing him every single time. That said, you do want to cast Mind Blast onto Tugar once you get out of those intermissions. Mind Blast has a mechanic that it soaks and absorbs damage that your enemies deal to you, and so applying Mind Blast before the Fel Burst comes out gives you a bit of extra mitigation. Shadowmanning yourself with Masochism Talented will give you 10% damage reduction, and I always cycle past this point. Once Tugar is around 65% HP, I'll always cycle between either using Desperate Prayer or using Rapture to mitigate that damage once you kind of come out of that phase. This is, again, near that last bit of time where you need to make sure you're breaking all those different stalactites or fallen rocks in the middle of the room. A couple important things to note is you want to be using Shadow or Death just about on cooldown. It's very cheap and it deals more damage than a Smite will. Those are super important. When the eggs come out, the eggs will eventually hatch. Make sure with those eggs you're dotting them up immediately. If you don't dot them up immediately, just Mindseer them down. It'll be more mana efficient for you. Some of these combinations can get really rough, where you get Fel Bursted as you come back, and then Jormog has a Sonic Scream, and those things are very, very scary. So again, cycling through that mitigation that you're going to have on hand. I PI myself on cooldown, I Shadow Fiend on cooldown, and the second Shadow Fiend and all your other Shadow Fiends after the first one, you're going to always cast them on Jormog. You're always going to cast it on the Worm as you're going to be going through this. Okay? Once again, positioning yourself for Divine Star and everything is going to be super important. And from basically this point on, about halfway through Tugar's health, your whole focus is just going to be on killing off the spitters rapidly. I like to keep Tugar dotted up for a lengthy period of time until I get him extremely low, but you want to make sure you start focusing on killing off those spitters as best as you possibly can, because eventually you're going to go from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 eventually, and that's going to be super important. Once again, you get out of those intermission phases, you continue cycling those defensives. So you Shadowman yourself, dispel the debuff, rapture yourself, clear off the totem, and then you start focusing more and more damage into Jormog over and over and over again, right? You keep on using the Mind Blast trick. It's more important later on, but it's always good to be able to get into that sort of habit. And once again, you keep on working the health down. I always try to make sure I'm dotting Tormog after the second Sonic Screech that he does, because he goes downstairs pretty rapidly after the fact. And from here on out, you don't really have to worry about positioning Jormog to be able to break any of the mechanics. I pretty much just make sure that I'm going to be killing off the spitters. And like I said, Mindseer does a lot better of a job, a substantially better job, than just sitting there in Shadow or painting them all day and night. So keep that in mind. What you need to be able to get yourself ready to do, though, is you need to make sure that you're preparing yourself for the end of the fight, because, as I mentioned, we haven't been using Pain Sup or Barrier. You can kind of use them early on if you get stunned or something bad's going on, right? But generally, you don't want to use them that much. You want to make sure you have them on hand for the end of the encounter, because the whole goal here is once one of them dies, the other is going to enrage. Some people were saying that Tugar doesn't enrage if Jormog dies, but Tugar's still going to deal a crazy amount of damage because he starts pumping more damage as the fight starts to end. So once again, you continue going through these very simple mechanics and getting into that very simple flow. And as I mentioned before, you don't have to worry too much about taking out any of these fallen rocks once you've removed all of the stacks. Just be prepared during the intermission period to dispel your dot debuff, to fear Tugar. It doesn't matter at what point in Tugar's cast that you fear him, so don't stress about that either. You will have plenty of time on hand to get your fear back. And then once again, you just think to yourself, what's the next one? So for this one coming up, a Jormog, I'm going to have to Rapture again. I also have Shadow Fiend, PI back, all of that other good stuff. And so I make sure I get my Mind Blast up. And this should have been my Rapture. And as you can see, that's around that 30% point is where you're always going to need that extra defensive CD. So thankfully, yeah, you can face tank it for a little while, but it's definitely not going to be something that lasts forever here, all right? We're going to skip on a little bit because the mechanics will pretty much stay the same. But the goal of what I'm doing here is I'm trying to work Jormog down so that I can kill them very closely together the entire time. And what this is going to allow me to do is allow me to save my Psychic Scream and kill off Tugar before he can cast on me. That way, I'll be able to buy myself more time to finish off Jormog once he enrages, okay? Once you start getting around to that 20%, 25% HP breakpoint on Tugar, this is where you need to start being a lot more disciplined, to be able to Mind Blast Tugar before he is going to cast Fell Burst on you, have a shield up, have Shadow Mend, give you Masochism, all that stuff. You need to be really, really disciplined about doing that. Otherwise, he could kill you. Keep in mind, health pots are really, really strong in these, so make sure you have them on hand because it might just save your life after like a Sonic Scream comes around or something like that, right? Ideally, you'll be able to hold your Pain Sup and Barrier and everything like that for after this phase. And pretty much the whole time you want to start making up for the deficit in HP, the difference in HP that's come around. You can see there around 20%. I don't cast the Mind Blast onto Tugar, and I get dropped extremely low, and then it starts burning more of my mana to be able to compensate for the extra health that I've lost. So even though I had Desperate Prayer on hand, getting closer and closer and closer to be getting killed here. Once you're getting into that sub 20% on Tugar, he's also just spawning tons of ads. This is 4 waves of ads. You're going to have 5 after that. Your positioning for Divine Star is always incredibly important. And again, at this point, once you've cleared off all the stacks from Jormog, you don't have to worry anymore about positioning him whatsoever. Just make sure that he doesn't run you over at all. Okay? Once you come back from this phase, again, same principles we've been talking about. Utilizing Rapture or Desperate Prayer, cycling between the two of them to be able to min-max your defensive and everything. And we're always staying disciplined and making sure we are having those on hand just to be able to, and solely for that purpose. So you also have to make sure you're not going to be getting stunned. One great way to do that is to move into the middle of the room the second the earthquake phase starts, right? If you move into the middle of the room, Jormog is just going to do a little circuit of the room, and you'll have some time to position yourself. This is also a huge area where I should have been using Mindseer, as the value of it is significantly better. So use Mindseer in the intermission to kill off these ads. And keep in mind, killing off the ads in the intermission is the priority at this point. Once you get this many ads, you don't want to be dodging them later on in the phase, right? The only time that you're going to ignore the ads is the very, very tail end of the fight. Once you're sub 10%, by the way, this is where you need to cycle between Pain Sup or Barrier in addition to your usual defensive. So here, I use Desperate Prayer and I use Pain Suppression, right? Both of those things together to be able to survive. I also have, of course, my Mask as a mitigation. I should have had my Mind Blast there again, so keep in mind you have a little wiggle room to be able to do it, but not a whole lot. Here I check the HP, and they're very close together. And what you want to do is you want to get Tugar very low, around the 6-7% mark. Continue cleaving him with things like Mindseer, Divine Star, and everything. You want to get it to the point where you can finish him off pretty reasonably quickly once the next intermission starts. So I dot him up once again, I get ready for my Fear Bomb on him, and this is super important. Then I pretty much just stop damage on Tugar. Because what I want to do is, see that Fear I used in that intermission? I'm always using it there, right? I don't want to use any more Fears on Tugar after this point. Jormog's sub 10% onto this one. I continue cleaving, natural cleave, natural dots, all that other stuff. I should use Barrier here, but I don't think I do because I'm cringe, and I almost die for the fact of it. But if you use Barrier there, you're going to have, obviously, a lot more safe of an opportunity. Once Jormog's about to be going down, I make sure I re-dot him. I make sure I add whatever damage that I personally can. I should have hit a Shadow of Death on him there, too. But this is it. This is the part that makes it easy. If you kill Tugar right here, as the intermission goes, you have a Fear Bomb positioned right as Jormog is about to get started with his phase. So you're more patient, and you lean on those defensives, and you're more disciplined on your setup and very consistent on your setup to be able to mitigate every single attack that goes against you, right? Following a very similar format. I don't care too much about killing off these ads. I'd rather just sit by and make sure that I have all the mana that I need. The second Jormog comes up, I drop the Fear Bomb, interrupt him, PI myself, schism, and start blasting damage into him because I have a couple seconds before the next Sonic Scream. It's about like a 10-second delay between Sonic Screams, so if you Fear Bomb interrupt one, you have a bit of breathing room to finish him off on the next one. Get them as close together in health as you can, and play it slow, and I guarantee you're going to be able to get this one down without too much problem. The consistency, the discipline on this one, and the patience on this challenge is probably paramount to most everything else. If you guys want to see the raw video and everything of this one, it'll be linked in the description down below. I'll also be adding some updates to my written guide and everything like that if you want to check it out. Also linked in the description below. Like I said, I didn't use any cringe BC triple socket gear or nonsense or anything like that. But if you're interested in grabbing those things, they'll probably make your life easier. Also, linked in the description below, as Wowhead has a nice little guide for that. But otherwise, thanks so much for the patience and getting these guys updated and out there and everything like that. Thanks so much for tuning in. Love you faces, guys. I'll catch y'all next time.